Hey guys, today I'm going to show you my process for an open cup acrylic pour. You'll get to see how I mix my colors and how you can get amazing cells even without silicone. I've sped up most of the parts of the video, so keep in mind that in reality I'm actually moving a little bit slower and the paints are shifting around a little bit slower than what you'll see. Okay, so what I've done here is I've gone online and found a random color palette that I really liked, and I kind of guesstimated what colors of paint that I would use to achieve that color palette. And you can see below that I've written them down. I kind of have an idea, and I'm going to show you which paints I use. Now, to start off with, I've got a Craftsmart Plum, and I've also got Liquitex Deep Violet. And then I've got a Deco Art Garnet Extreme Sheen, Golden, the Fluid Acrylics Pyrrole Orange, and the Derlide Yellow. Then I also have a Alizarin Crimson Hue by Liquitex and Master's Touch Scarlet. So today we're going to be using Floetrol, and then we are going to be using bottled water. That's just to thin everything out to the same consistency. I have 3-ounce cups. So to be completely honest, I don't actually measure my stuff very precisely, but I do usually put it in 3-ounce cup, about halfway mark, and then I add maybe about a tablespoon of paint, give or take, depending on how thick the paint actually is. And you'll see that I use a lot less of the fluid acrylics than I do some of the like craft paints. So if you're wondering why I have the black thing over my Floetrol, it's actually a pair of cut up pantyhose that I've rubber banded around it. Floetrol has the tendency to get these clumps in it, and pantyhose do an excellent job of straining those out. So now I'm going to be separating out my Floetrol into the different cups for each color. You don't really have to do this back and forth stuff, but I like to try to get them as even as possible, so do you. Now I'm going to be starting off with my plum color. I'm going to shake my paints really well. That's just, good habit to get into. Sometimes they get separated, especially if they're old. Again, I don't really measure my stuff precisely, so I just kind of squeeze it in there until I feel like it's enough. So we're going to squeeze in the plum, and then we're going to add a little bit of this deep violet into it. And basically, you're just going to play around with it until you feel like your color is close enough to the color swatch that you've picked out. It will take a little bit of playing around to actually get the colors that you want, but as long as you keep on practicing and you kind of have an idea of how your paints will blend together, and of course, basic color wheel knowledge always comes in handy, then you should be able to get something at least relatively close. Now I'm just mixing until I feel like all of it's mixed together, and with the Floetrol, make sure you don't have any streaks of white or anything. We'll worry about consistency once all of our paints are mixed together. Now I'm going on to the garnet, the extreme sheen, and then I'm also adding the crimson into it and a little bit of that deep violet, because they were similar on the swatch, but they had that little bit of a hue difference that I was going for. So I'm adding a little bit of Payne's gray into it as well. That kind of darkens it up, but it doesn't really change the color much. It's actually really good color to add to different things, especially blues. Now, so I have some of the Pyrrole red already mixed up. So I pour a little bit of my Floetrol out, and since this already has Floetrol in it, I'm going to just add it on into the extra and then add a little bit more of my paint into it just to make sure that I have enough tint to go around. I add a little bit of the scarlet in with it to darken it up and mix it until I'm satisfied. Now I'm moving on to my Pyrrole orange. I'm going to start mixing that in just a little bit. The fluid acrylics do go a long way. Then on top of that, I'm going to add a little bit of cadmium orange to it. Um, as you'll see, I'm not very happy with the color at that point, so I add a little bit of my last color into it and go from there. Now, again, I already had some of the yellow mixed in. Silly me, did not remove any of the Floetrol, so I made way too much, but you'll see that I set some of this to the side. I also add a little bit of deep yellow into this one, just a little bit of a squeeze into it. Mix it real well. You'll see me, I pour it into a different cup just to get it real mixed, and then I'll separate out how much I actually need. Just as a little aside, these little condiment cups are excellent for storing paint. They keep them pretty airtight, so you don't only thing you have to worry about is them separating, and a good mix after they've been sitting for a little bit is not a problem because they just mix right back together. So they're really good if you make extra paint and needs on accident or on purpose, if you want to keep some around. They're really good. I've also found these little cups on Amazon. They're condiment cups as well, but they have an attached lid and they're a bit thicker plastic and they're excellent because you can wash them out and you can reuse them and they're great. Now I'm going to show you how I test the consistency and thickness of my paints. I'm going to take this plastic sheet and just drop a similar amount of paint onto the top of it and hold it up and see how quickly they come down. So as long as they're all coming down and around the same pace, then I know that they're all the same consistency. Since some of these didn't come down at the same rate, I add just a little bit of water into those paint colors to thin them out. I also like to see how the colors are actually going to blend together, so you'll see me scrape across a couple of them just to see the different directions of how they blend, what colors go on top of each other, and what colors separate. See how they kind of interact with each other before I actually put it onto the canvas. So now that we've moved on to our canvas, I'll show you the process of how I go about doing an open cup pour. So I didn't show me mixing the white on screen, but I mixed a really big cup of it. Just measure out your Floetrol. It's the same process, only you scale it up. So you'll be using more Floetrol, more paint, more water if you need it a little bit thinner. Here, my paint is around the same consistency, maybe slightly thicker than my actual colors. So I'm going to pour a little on my canvas and then you'll see me level it out. That's just to give me a base coat and it also helps the paint move around a lot easier. So I just spread it out pretty evenly. I make sure that I get my sides because they do not like to go over. So I usually like to get the edges and everything really well. So whenever you do go to move your painting around, it'll float over the edges really easily and you won't have these big gaps and everything. So for the cup, I'm actually using a cookie cutter. I think I found these at Michael's in the baking section, but this one in particular has a fluted edge, so that's the edge that I'm going to use. I think that it gives a little bit of an extraness to it. I don't know how to explain it, but it gives into this little edging of it. You'll see how it works on the screen whenever I move the cup. So I just take my colors and I start pouring them in one by one. You don't have to pour them all exactly on top of each other. You can swirl them around or you can puddle them up, however you choose. Once I have a layer of my paint, I am going to put a little bit more white paint around the cookie cutter. It does help the paint move and flow better. So then I just kind of slightly lift up and start moving it around. You'll see me moving it in different directions, setting it down, lifting it up, and then once I feel like enough of the paint has flowed out of it, I'll start on my next layers. Same colors. You don't have to go in the same color pattern. You don't have to go in the same order. You can mix it up, make it your own. Just pour them in and then lift and pull. If you look down at the bottom right, you'll kind of see what I was talking about with the fluted edges. You can see how it kind of pulled through some of that white into it. From here, you just keep adding your paint until you're happy with your design. And once you get to the edge or wherever you're deciding to stop, just kind of drag the cup through a little bit extra. So you're pulling the rest of the paint through and you don't have big globs of what you just poured on there. So the torch is just to pop any air bubbles, and it also will pull some of the cells out. Make sure that you've got it on low and it's not too terribly high because you can scorch your paint and you will scorch your paint. It basically it dries it too quick and you get this really weird film on it, well, like a dried paint film. I'm going to add a little bit of white around the design and on the edges a little bit more so it'll help the color actually spread a little bit easier. The colors float over the top of the white, so it makes it easier to stretch out your design without ruining it. Once I've stretched it out all the way and I'm happy with where everything's positioned, I'll go back around with my white, make sure all my edges are covered, make sure my corners are covered, and then I always run my finger around the bottom part of my canvas. That will keep more paint from shifting off, and it'll help keep your painting from shifting in general as it dries. If there's not paint dripping off of the bottom of the canvas, then it's not pulling the rest of the paint off of the canvas. So it's a good habit to get into if you want to help keep your paintings from shifting so much whenever they dry. Using the torch again at the end, that's just to pop any air bubbles that might have gotten trapped. And if you watch closely, you can see on the edges of the white, it really makes this little cell formation pattern. I'm just running it over real quick. I've got my flame really low and I'm trying really hard not to scorch the paint. All right, guys, there you have it. That is an open cup pour. All you have to do is lay down a base coat of paint, whatever color you really want. Try different colors, white, black, even blue, gray, pink, purple, whatever color you want as your base coat. Then start pouring in your other paint colors into the cup and move it around. You can lift it and move it and shake it and whatever you decide to do, play around with it. You'll get different results every single time. You don't have to choose the colors that I just did. You can do primary colors and you will end up getting a rainbow because of the way the paints mix together. It's really an amazing method to try out and I really recommend it. Don't have to worry about using silicone in this method because the cells, the way the cup moves around, it pulls the paint over and under each other, so the cells naturally form on their own. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you have any questions about this method, feel free to comment below. I will do my best to answer any questions. Also, if you have a certain method that you would like to see next, let me know and I'll try to make a video on that next. If you would like to stay up to date on any videos or tutorials that I'm going to be posting in the future, go ahead and subscribe so you'll know as soon as they're posted. Thanks again, and I'll see you guys soon.